Somebody on the phone lines here on line one who is one of the original dignitaries of the FDH Lounge.
Nathan Noy.
Don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years. I'm rocking my pants, putting suckers in fear, making the tears rain down like a monsoon. Listen to the bass go boom, exploding.
Nate, how you doing, buddy? I know you're as charged up for this as we are.
Absolutely. I'm wondering if they'll be playing that in Marshall's locker room tomorrow night. Probably not.
I don't think it's gonna do them any good. Let's bring in, as I say, additionally here, good friend of ours, the scout Ken Beck's FirstDownScouting.com, a charter member, a member in great standing of the 21st Century Media Alliance, along with FDH and STN. Scout, how you doing, pal? Great to have you on tonight.
Hey, what's going on, Rick? You know, anytime it's time to talk some football, the scout's there for you.
Oh, yeah. We're going to have fun tonight. And again, as I said previously, I regret that family illness is keeping away John Benet of the Mile High Report here tonight. But it's great to have you two guys with us here. Jason Jones in another 5 to 10 minutes coming on. And I want to tell you, I've been pointing to this for a long time. I decided to do September 1st as a night just for football, and it's justifiable on the subject matter alone. But I want to say what really got me hyped, we did this for the 100th episode. We were looking for a standout cornerstone feature for the 100th one back April 28th. We couldn't get you on, Scout, because you had professional commitments that night. John Benet was on with us instead. He's out tonight. You're in. But it's going to be great nonetheless. It just went so well with that night. It's not just talking football. It's talking football with this panel and knowing that we have a panel to do this that is better than anybody else anywhere could assemble. That's what excites me. That's what's got me fired up here for tonight. So let's get to it. Let's talk some general theory here at the outset. I was figuring we'd kind of talk some general theory, X's and O's. That's a lot of what we did back on the 100th episode. We didn't get much specifically into NFL and NCAA, but we'll get a chance to do that later on. I'd like to start with this one here, the 3-4 and a 4-3, something we talked about on the 100th episode. You've got a situation where, and I'll start with you on this one, Scout, and get your thoughts. It's very interesting to me that Notre Dame now is running the 3-4. We talked about that back in April, why nobody in college was. Now they are. It's almost kind of a mirror image right now. Charlie Weiss used to flash the Super Bowl rings in the faces of recruits and say, hey, come play my pro-style offense. I'll get you ready for the pros. Now, Brian Kelly can do this with guys that are cut out to play in the 3-4. Hey, come to Notre Dame. We will be a unique proving ground for you for the 3-4 offense. Many pro teams are running this. Hardly any college programs are. We are unique in our ability to groom you for the pro game. So as you look at this, Ken, what are some of the ramifications? How far-reaching is this going to be that Brian Kelly went and hired himself a 3-4 guy to run his defense for him, both in terms of how they're going to line up on Saturdays and getting guys ready to play on Sundays?
Well, quite honestly, I think it was a stroke of genius, meaning there really is not too many 3-4 defenses in the college ranks, like you were saying, Rick, and he's pretty much going to have his pick of the litter, talking about those tweener-type athletes and the guys already at that type of size to come right in and fit right into the program. Also, when you're looking transitioning to the NFL level, now you don't have to, try to project guys when they're already there. And one thing the NFL doesn't like to do is try to project. They try to go with the sure thing. So that he's going to go to this 3-4 right now when a lot of teams are at the college level, aren't doing that. He can definitely pitch the NFL draft side of it. And another thing is, I'm sure you guys know it's harder to get the big guys on the D-line. I mean, there's so many guys, only a finite number of guys coming out of the high school ranks that have the size, speed, dimensions that you're looking for that you can plug right in and take care of business. So just by sheer numbers, it's easier and quicker to get 4 guys at the linebacker spot than it would be at the D-line spot. So I think it was one thing he had to do, and it's just smart long term.
Yeah, damn Skippy, and it's hard to get the guys that are the big space eater hogs that you need in there on that defensive line that can occupy the offensive line and let the linebackers fly around and make the plays. We were talking about this in April, Nate, when you were part of the group, and when we were looking at it then, it was a matter of projectability. And I remember you making the point and saying you're going to have to get bright kids anyways, and that's what the college guys are looking for. They're looking for bright kids with adaptability. But again, like the scout was saying just a second ago, this seems like a game changer because it's one thing you're going to target bright kids, projectability on what they can do. Now there's one program churning out kids where you don't have to project what they can do in the 3-4. You just pop the film on your screen and you watch it.
Oh, I absolutely agree, Rick. And I mean, the other thing that you just kind of touched on there, even though Notre Dame's had multiple down seasons, they still have the significant advantage of having their own television contract. When you go recruit a kid for Notre Dame, you say, look, we're going to be on national TV every game. This isn't, even if you're playing for one of these Big Ten teams, there'll be 2 or 3 games where nobody watches it, probably unless you're local. But everybody in the country will watch all of your football games. And you're right. I mean, it's so easy now for the scouts, flip it on, there it is. You get to see these guys play 10, 11, 12, 13 times in the season, and it is a great selling point for Kelly. We'll see how it works. I think a lot of what type of defense you run depends on the matchups you face, and so, they're going to play more teams that feature the pass versus the run. Those are the kind of factors. And, even if that's the base defense, they might switch to the, go back and forth depending on the situation as well as, again, the matchup. So,
Well, another good thing about running that 3-4-2, I guess, you guys got to think about, too, I'm sure you'll agree, is you're getting more skilled athletes out there. So it's giving you a lot more versatility both, against the run and the pass, because it's putting a lot of pressure on that offensive line as far as who to block, where to block. Do we double team? I mean, are we doing a counter? It's just so many different things other than just the athleticness of the players that you're going against. It's just where are they coming from? I mean, you can put guys in a 2-point stance, 3-point, 4-point, and it just starts a lot of confusion. If you look at the Steelers, looking at the NFL level, and even the Ravens, you can bring that type of mentality to the college level and be one of the first teams to do it. I'll tell you what, that's going to be a big advantage.
Do you think that'll force Notre Dame's opponents into more 2 tight end sets and that type of offense, knowing that they're going to match up against a defense that's going to bring it like that?
That's a good way to counter that. I was thinking about that myself, Nate, and I think that's a good way to counter it, especially a team like Alabama with the 2 running backs, and the 2 tight ends, and just go right at them defense. The best way to beat the athletes is just go straight right at them.
I got to say, and this has been a really good taste of things right off the bat here, I'd like to take this moment, as self-serving as it is, to compare and contrast to a terrestrial radio station that we have in town here, where one of the hosts last year, if you can believe this, during the season was bemoaning the fact that there was not much of a pass rush from the defensive ends in the Browns, 3-4 defense. No names, please. Rizzo. So I'd like to just compare and contrast this level of discourse from why aren't the defensive ends in a 3-4 rushing the passer better. Just awesome. Great start here, fellas. I got the next one here. I want to set this up. I'll start with you again, Ken, because this is from something where you and I have discussed this in the past, and I referred back to the ebook previously at the beginning of the year here when you and Jason were doing the chat that I moderated. We were talking about quarterbacks in the league here. It was very interesting. You and I kind of came at this, I will say, from a little bit kind of different perspectives here. I'm looking at it, admittedly, maybe on the surface, I guess, I don't know, but I'm looking at it like there's a lot of young QBs coming into the league who really kind of seem promising, from the Ryans and the Flaccos potentially to the Sanchez's, on and on. I think Stafford in Detroit is going to have a bright future eventually. None of these guys are quite at the Peyton Manning level yet, but it wouldn't shock me if, at least 2 or 3 of them got up near there in the time to come. It's very interesting. You kind of took the other aspect of it here, Ken. You were looking at it like, well, you still got a lot of the best athletes that are getting put at positions other than quarterback. You've got, the Calvin Johnsons of the world. I think you cited him as an example. He's playing wide receiver, so you don't have the best athletes on the field doing that. So just like to kind of take a look at this here. Basically, we'll start with you, Scout. Take a minute, talk about your position, and then I'll kind of get Nate's thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think it all starts in the high school level. And if you look back at the high school level, normally, even a pickup game, you're looking at the best athlete, you throw him behind center and make him do, let him do what he wants. let his creativity take over, you know, and so on and so forth. Now, as you go up to different levels, let's go, you know, junior high might be the same, pee-wee, you know, junior high might be the same way, even with high school, depending on the level of high school that you're playing with. You still usually have your best athletes, you know, getting the touches in their hands. And once they hit the college level, I tend to see your better athletes tend to be moved to different positions. And a lot of times I'll hear, well, you know, we got a good quarterback here now, and we like to get our best players on the field. And I have no problem with that. But projecting long term, because like I brought up, Kelvin Johnson, Brandon Marshall, those guys coming out of high school were high school quarterbacks. Now, you know, for me to say I know for a doubt they'd be franchise-type guys if they went to college and went and did what they did, you know, I can't really say that. But what I can say, once you have playmakers at that size, with ideal size, running a 4-3-4-4, the ability to scramble, the ability to improvise, the ability to you know, scramble and elude defenders to keeping pass plays alive, I think, you know, those type of players would be much more important to the team than put at a wide receiver position or another position where they don't get quite as many touches and quite honestly aren't going to be as helpful to the team.
Okay, well, let's look at it here. Let's get your opinion on this, Nate. I'm saying kind of a quasi-golden age of the QBs coming up. The scout seems to be saying it's still not all that it can be. Where do you come down on this?
Yeah, I agree, Rick. I mean, I think you got to look at, you know, the number of jobs available, and, you know, you've got, who knows, thousands of high schools. You have thousands of kids that get to be quarterback in high school. You've got 120 division football, bowl division schools in college football. You know, then you've got some pretty good IAA schools. You know, Delaware's producing quarterbacks. The double A schools do. But, you know, you've got 120 of those jobs. There's only 32 jobs in the NFL, and it's not like there's turnover every year either. I mean, you've got Tom Brady, Peyton Manning. Those guys are going to be around 4 or 5 more years. So, you know, every year there's, 3 to 4 opening jobs in the NFL for a quarterback. You've got 120 kids that were just a starting quarterback at their college, so 3 or 4 of those guys have the potential to become a starting quarterback in the NFL probably. I mean, you know, if you've got that type of talent and you want to play pro football, then a lot of times I think you have to switch out of the position to do that. And, you know, I mean, if you're the best thing in the world, and the other thing is, you know, think about the college level. Think about the guys that have won the Heisman and how nothing in the pros can't even make a pro team. You know, Troy Smith. Now
what I will say about that, Nate, I don't mean to interrupt. A lot of those guys are stat guys, but not really projected towards the NFL. You know what I'm saying? Like the BYU guys, the system quarterback guys, like the Texas Tech guys. Examples of guys I'm talking about coming out now that are going to redefine how the NFL's played are, you know, Gerard Johnson, Texas A&M, about 6'6", 230, 240. Ryan Mallett, 6'6", 240, coming out of, you know, Arkansas. Cameron Newton, you know, the one-time backup at Florida. Now at Auburn, same thing, 6'6", 230, 240. And these guys aren't just, you know, big guys. They can move, make things happen. And I'm going to tell you, unless teams are starting to look prior at Ohio State right here in the area, unless you're going to start to gravitate to those kind of athletes, I think you're going to be behind the table. And just like over at Notre Dame, how they're going to the 3-4, you got to be ahead instead of following when it comes to out-of-the-box type thinking.
Now, let me ask you this. I don't want to go on a tangent, Rick, but it just popped in my mind. I think it's a question that needs to be asked.
Let's go with it.
You know, especially with Ingram and Little Gimpy, Pryor right now the second favorite in Vegas to be the Heisman winner, you know, and it's hard to repeat. So I think he's got a great chance to win the Heisman. Say he does win the Heisman, what do you think of him as an NFL prospect? Do you think he has a chance to be a quarterback, or do you think he needs to switch positions to really have a legitimate shot to play on Sundays?
I'm sorry, who did you say this was?
Pryor.
For Terrell Pryor.
Oh, wow. I got mixed opinions because I'm going to tell you, I really don't think there's another position other than quarterback that he can play, because the thing is, projecting, he's just not going to be able to play a defensive guy. I mean, he just doesn't have the physical toughness. I feel like once you're on the one side of the it's easy to go from defense to offense than the other way around, because you're just not used to those hits, and then you're making that move at the NFL level. So I'm just definitely taking defense out of it. On the offensive side of it, the only thing I can project him at is quarterback, because he's definitely not going to be the type you're going to put weight on and try and throw him at the tight end spot. I think he definitely lacks the quick twitch. He might run a 4-3, but he just doesn't have the quick twitch to elude, players at the next level, at the wide receiver spot. Now, he can go deep, but you still got to have some kind of versatility at the NFL level. So the only thing I can project him at is at quarterback. And, honestly, I would be projecting him in the mid-second to third round because his lack of consistency. And I just don't see the overall quarterback skill in the pocket. I just can't see him bringing somebody back to Ohio State in the fourth quarter being 14 points down and everything being on him and him bringing the offense back.
Now, Scout, let me ask you about that. I want to draw you out and use that as a little bit of a devil's advocate here for what you're talking about with putting the great athletes at quarterback, because I think we can agree. I mean, he might be lacking the quick twitch and a handful of other things, but he is a dynamic physical specimen. I think we can agree on this. I wonder to what extent coaches are shying away, because at the end of the day, that arm is I don't know if it's necessarily the most important thing. If you're a complete immobile slog, it doesn't get you anywhere. But you have to have the delivery system to be able to get at the guys. Touch on the deep passes would be nice, but you've got to be able to hit guys intermediate, underneath, whatever. The problem with Pryor, I've seen it from watching games where I've been in person. I saw it at a Rose Bowl party last year. The guy that I was watching it with, we looked at each other and shook our heads at the same time. I think it was on the one interception he threw. He has such a great arm. He's so dynamic. He does like the elbow cock throw.
Right.
I mean, he can throw it like 40 yards on an elbow cock. He falls in love with his physical gifts. Isn't he the kind of guy that makes coaches look at like a Calvin Johnson or something and say, you know what, better safe than sorry. I'm going to put the great athlete. Yeah, he won't have the ball in his hands as much, but at least, maybe he won't fall too much in love with his physical gifts and make bad throws.
Now, you know who he reminds me of coming out of the 2006 draft? I remember they had Liner, who was just about ready to get cut or traded. Of course, Vince Young. And if you remember right, I wasn't high on either one of those guys.
Right.
And the third guy was Cutler. Now, I was higher on Cutler, and to this point, I'd have to say I'm not going to call him a bust. At least he's had the higher ceiling between the three. And I'm kind of putting Pryor in that same situation, because the one thing I've noticed with the quarterback position, if you cannot process quick enough, the Charlie Fry factor. See guy open, how long does it take you to process to get it to the guy?
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? If you have to think to throw it to him, and your timing's not there, like Pryor, along with the funny throwing motion, I'm going to tell you, over the years, I've been doing this for 20, 30 years with the evaluations, and if you're a duck now, you're going to stay a duck later normally, 90-something% of the time. So though you might get, enthralled about his athletic ability, and I know how I brung that up in the past, about the athletic quarterback and so on and so forth. But in this situation, I just don't think it's either one or two things. That the Ohio State coaching staff hasn't worked with him, or he just doesn't have the throwing motion, and it doesn't have anything to do with so much IQ as far as if you're in a college setting, but football IQ processing, and I just don't think he has it. When it, like I said, see open guy, get it there right now. And I just don't. If you see your top guys, Drew Brees is perfect for this.
Right.
His timing. Once he sees it, it's gone. He doesn't think to throw it; it just goes. And I don't see that from him, and that scares the heck out of me.
Do you think it's important that in the college career, maybe you face 3 or 4 games where you have guys the quickness of defensive backs in the NFL, because there's just not as many of them? Is that the big thing, that the reaction time for the DBs in the NFL is just, you've never faced it before until you get there, and that's when you get exposed?
You know what? I really don't think that's it, Nate. I think really when it comes to the quarterback position, I think you're either born with that IQ, to process, or you're not. And, another guy, there's so many down the road, like a Jeff George, had the rocket arm. I know you remember him, Rick.
Yeah.
But he just, if you really watched him, he never seemed comfortable he just didn't process. He didn't look fluid. He didn't look comfortable. It looked like he was thinking and working because he didn't have the IQ. And that's why I say that Charlie Fry, because a lot of us, Cleveland Browns fans, I know you have to remember that. Charlie be in the pocket, the feet start, getting funny. He started seeing the defenders probably from left to right. And I'm going to tell you, the process, the throwing process and IQ just goes out the box. And then that's why you have a lot of the interceptions. And DeLome is another one. I know he's a Brown and everything, but it's the same thing I see again, And the IQ process to get that ball there just isn't there.
Before we
I've got to ask you this real quick.
Yeah.
Jamarcus Russell, what was your take on him before he was drafted, and then what happened to him?
Total bust. I don't know if Rick remembers that, but total. I wouldn't even took him in the first round.
Oh, yeah. But here's what
total bust. When you come to your pro day, okay, I don't care if he was the hottest thing since butter with potatoes. If you come to your pro day and you're 20, 30 pounds overweight, if I'm in the top 5, you're eliminated. Because at 22 or 21, if you're not at a good status with your weight, then what are you going to be 3 to 4 years down the line after you got that paycheck? I mean, you have to start. The process of evaluating these guys aren't just on the field, their character. And after you evaluate guys for so long, I can tell you after 2 games, if that guy pretty much, without talking to him in person, if he's got character. There's certain things how a player walks, how he acts after, how does he go back to the huddle? How does he do after adversity? Does he put his head down? For quarterbacks, I mean, do they take charge in the huddle? I mean, there's a lot of things that you look for, not just athletically, but certain things that I call ballers. Certain real true ballers do certain things, and that goes across the line with no matter what position.
Guys who can go snap the whistle, as you like to say, Scout. Before we move on to the next thing I was going to ask you, let me follow up there. You were telling me off air. It's funny, we were talking about Terrell Pryor a second ago. You may not be as impressed with him, but there is another Ohio State quarterback of relatively recent vintage that you are impressed with, that you see as being undervalued.
Oh, no question about it. Troy Smith. Now, before I get into talking about Troy Smith, I know in the past, Rick, I'll come up with guys Matt Moore, for instance, last year. I was bringing him up. I think I brought him up to you last couple of years, a guy at UCLA undrafted. And I remember him sitting behind DeLome, and I remember at UCLA. Coming out of UCLA, he was kind of thin. He needed to, fill out his body, but he had the touch. He had the process I'm talking about. Do I think he's a franchise guy? No question about it. But he's a guy that, can do until you get that franchise guy. He's a guy that can take you to the playoffs, and who knows what's going to happen from there. But, getting back to what you were saying, okay, I got so much processing. What's going on, Rick? What was the question? You know how the scout gets.
No problem. I know you got a lot going on there. Basically, Troy Smith. Talk about why you like him.
Yeah, I'm really glowing about him. And he's another one. There's like a handful of guys right now. Whitehurst was one of them I talked to you.
Yeah.
And I told you about him before Seattle grabbed him away from the Chargers. And he's got all the things I'm talking about along with the size. Now, Troy Smith might not have what you call ideal size, but like I told you in the past, Rick, true ballers come in all different shapes and sizes.
Right.
Look at a Steve Smith. He doesn't have the ideal size, but I don't know too many people that wouldn't take him as your first or second receiver. You know what I mean? Now, and getting back to Troy Smith, he has all the things I'm looking for. Troy Smith, despite what most people say, is a pocket passer.
Right.
He looks to throw first. He's got good foot he reminds me of Drew Brees in a lot of ways because he's got good active feet, constantly moving, which is always a good thing. If you look at Peyton Manning, a lot of the good guys, their feet are constantly moving, in small little increments. And he's always looking downfield. When the play breaks down, the first thing you notice with Troy, he doesn't look to run downfield. He looks to extend plays. When he throws the ball normally is crisp. He gets it, gets his feet up under him, gets his hips up under him, gets a nice torque and throws it. He has the ability, to throw on the move, in the pocket, durability, can take the hits. And I'm going to tell you, if anybody ever takes the chance of bringing this guy in And even as your number two, because as you know, most times number twos are going to get their shot one way or the other. He's really going to surprise some people.
Okay. Very interesting.
Rick, if I can interject a quick question, I really want to know what the scout thinks about Jake Locker, since most people are projecting him potentially to be the first pick in the draft next year.
Yeah, what do you think?
He hasn't had a lot of winning success at Washington, but what's your take on his ability?
He scares me a little bit because he kind of fits the prior mold, not the same kind of dimensions or anything like that. But he's definitely a football player. He scares me as a quarterback because, once again, I don't like his delivery. I do have to do some more homework on him, but just off the top of my head, I don't see the natural IQ process or the progressions that I'm looking for. But, with them quarterbacks, a lot of times, people overlook things like a Jamarcus Russell because he could throw it out of the stadium. Well, we'll overlook that, he might not have a high percentage throwing, or we'll overlook this, that, and the other. I'm going to tell you, you really got to watch that. Right now, I'm looking at him. I know he's not going to drop that low, but I'm looking at him as a guy you picking 15th overall or down, because he's not going to come right in and change your team right off the bat. So is he going to go 15th overall? No,
okay.
He won't do that. But I'm not high on him right now, as far as the number one pick.
Interesting. You got a strong track record of being right on this. Scout, I know you got a book in a little bit here, at least for now. I do want to ask you this, if I can, before we get to that. I know you worked with USA Football last year, back when the World Championships were in Canton. So I'll start with you on this. Question as to the talent pool here, the expanding talent pool. Where do you think some of the next great frontiers are going to come from? Internationally, are we anywhere close to that? Smaller colleges due to YouTube and other advancements in film sharing. You look at Ryan Clady having come out of Boise State. I saw that as kind of a milestone right there. It's not just a running back or a cornerback that slipped through the tackles, but a franchise left tackle. That kind of shows you this environment where guys are coming from unlikely places. So start with you, Scout. Where do you think some of the areas are, at least in the next couple of years, where we're going to get some of these unlikely guys emerging from?
Now, are you talking about from different countries, or are you talking about different colleges, off the mark colleges?
Well, I tell you what, a little bit of both, actually. I mean, do you think any of these countries are going to rival even the smaller colleges anytime soon for being talent pools? Or how are you kind of seeing this break down? We know about the football factories churning out guys. Right. That'll be a constant for the next 100 years like it was the last 100 years. But in terms of smaller schools, internationally, whatever, how do you think the talent pool is going to continue to emerge in some of the ways that may seem a little more unlikely to people?
Well, looking at when I was over at like you were saying with the USA team, we were definitely dominant over that way. I really didn't see any other teams that were close to us athletically. And you have to remember, that wasn't really, I wouldn't say our top guys.
Okay.
That was more like 3 to 4 star guys, just a few sprinkled 4-star guys. So if we would have, had our 5-star type guys, that, it would have been, totally one-sided. But, Canada had a few guys here and there that, could match up size-wise and somewhat quickness. But to be honest with you, most of the other countries, they're either lacking in size or quickness. They just, tend not to have the combination that you're looking for at the D1 top-level colleges. Now, maybe, the lower-level colleges in D1, maybe your Arkansas State or, somebody like that, maybe some of these guys can compete. But when you start talking Big Ten, SEC, top level of Division I, no, they're quite a ways off. But as far as the NFL draft goes, as far as, getting their talent pool, I'll tell you, Rick, I don't really think as many people understand. I'll say as far as a 5th round and undrafted guys, there are a ton of guys on NFL rosters right now. And I really do believe that the way the scouting process is done is really going to have to be changed up, because there just isn't enough time, I don't think, given to the lower level Division I teams, and God forbid, the Division II and III, which, most people don't have time for. But like Marshall. I know Marshall's, I believe, playing Ohio State, and there's a couple of guys that I love off that team, and you'll see those, I think they're playing tomorrow, aren't they?
Yeah, tomorrow night.
Yeah. And they got a couple of wide receivers over there, and I believe they're sophomores this upcoming year, Aaron Dobson and Tavius Wilson. And these kind of guys can play for, the Boise's, Ohio States, but they just happen to go to Marshall for whatever reason. These guys are all across the country, like you brought up Taylor from last year. Remember, from Ohio University, we were talking about him off the phone, Rick. Now, he could have easily started for Ohio State. This is a 4-3 guy, had good patterns, got drafted by, I believe, the Patriots, in the 5th, 6th, 7th round?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and Edelman. I know you remember him. I brought him up.
Yep.
He was a sensation last year, and that was a guy I remember raving about him coming out of Kent State. He was a quarterback, and like I said, he'd be a great converted guy, receiver, punt returner, kick returner type dude, and that's exactly what New England did, and you see the success he had. So not only do you have to have, the insight to know where to go to find these guys, you got to have the insight and out-the-box thinking to be able to change these guys, transitioning from a linebacker to fullback, a fullback to linebacker. Running back might have to go to cornerback, so on and so forth. You just want to get your best athletes with instincts for the football game on the field, and that's the best way to do it. And I am starting to see the NFL doing things such as that.
Interesting. But before I get Nate's take on this, are we at the point here, Scott, where you got to check out for a little bit, or how's your schedule looking?
I'll tell you what, you get ready to go to break?
Well, I'll tell you what.
I can do a couple of more minutes with you.
Oh, yeah. I'll tell you what.
One more guy I want to know about, Rick.
Well, I'll tell you what then. I'll tell you what, Scout. Let's hear Nate's response to what you just said, and then if you got any thoughts on that, go ahead and we'll go to break after that. So, Nate, you just heard the Scout breaking it down. What's your take on this, the future of the talent pool, aside from the obvious places?
Yeah, I agree with what the Scout said. I don't think internationally, you just don't. It's not like basketball, where it's so easy just to grab a hoop and you grab a ball and start shooting at a hoop. And with these, they just don't play our level of football anywhere. We don't have pee-wee football in Europe. They don't have the college level in Europe. So if you're not getting that type of experience, and how you're going to create that type of talent, and the best athletes don't want to play football. They want to play football or basketball. They're not going to play NFL football, American football. It ain't going to happen. The guy I really want to know about, too, I know we're a little off topic, but John Clay, Offensive Player of the Year in the Big Ten, has a chance to rival Pryor this year for that. What are his prospects for the NFL?
Yeah, what do you think, Scout?
I'm glad you brought him up because he's a guy, I tell you what, I already project him. He probably won't go there. I'm talking now, when I do projections, and Rick, you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about value.
Yep.
And the way I project my value is, okay, what do I think his highest ceiling is as a player? If he was, put in an ideal situation, and even if he wasn't. Okay, now, when I say a premier player, they can play in any kind of position. And it doesn't. If you put a Marshall Faulk in any kind of offense, he's going to excel no matter what. So he's a 5-star guy, a franchise running back, no doubt about it. John Elway. Those kind of guys come far few in between, and that's why they're top 5 picks. When you start talking about somebody like John Clay, to be honest with you, I think his best long-term position. Now, a lot of this has to do with what team he goes to. Now, a guy's going to be about 6'1", 248. I do like he does have good vision, okay, but I tell you what, he'd have to get into a situation somewhat like the Browns, like we were talking off the phone too, Rick, where you might can play, swap back and forth, fullback, running back, because I don't think John Clay, possesses the overall skills to be a 20-plus guy and effectively play like, let's say, a Ravens team and be able to push the corners. You see, if you can't push the corners consistently against the defense, your value is going to go down. Now, the one thing I like that from transition from college to the pro level that you have to have as a running back, and Rick, this is my pet peeve, you got to be able to run between the tackles.
Yep.
If you can't do that for me at the college level, I really don't have much use for you as a full-time running back. So, for instance, was it Jaquiz? What's the guy over at Oklahoma? Not Oklahoma State. Arizona, is it Arizona State? No. Oregon State.
Oh.
The little running back, Jaquiz Rogers.
Yeah, Rogers.
Now, I like him. And what I call him, he's a touches guy. Get him in space. Get him 15 to 20 touches in a game because he's an impact type of guy. Is he going to be an every down running back in the NFL? No, not in my opinion. But is he worthy to get 15 and 20 touches in a game? No question about it. Through special teams, backfield, slot, whatever you got to do. Almost like a McCluster that came out of Mississippi is at Kansas City right now. John Clay, getting back to him, he definitely has to go to the ideal situation if he's going to be a 20-plus carry guy. You know, let's say Pittsburgh, like back in the day. The Browns, how they're trying to do Peyton Hillis right now. Other than that kind of offense, I think, you know, he's going to be a situational type guy, like a Duckett that used to, you know, come out of Michigan State. Or he'd be an awesome fullback. An awesome fullback. Now, I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, and I know there might not be a lot of value for that type of fullback, but I'll tell you what, if you can get a guy at fullback, and if he could, you know, utilize his blocking skills properly, I'll tell you what, there's a lot of yards to be gained in that if that hole is open right there at that line. And he's got enough burst and enough straight line speed that he could be a weapon at that fullback spot if, you know, his blocking skills were good.
Yeah, and that's what you got to look for is that kind of versatility and the ability to, you know, throw the blocks as well as be able to, you know, tote the rock there, keep the confidence of the coaching staff all the way around. Jerome Harrison didn't have the confidence of the Browns coaching staff much of last year because of his perceived inability to pick up blitzes. I'll tell you what, we're going to go to the top of the hour break. Scott,
Rick, I'll tell you what, let me throw this out to you and Nate before I get out of here. I'll come back on. I got to take off and get right back.
Okay.
But now here's one of my quick out-of-the-box thinking. Now, if you remember, I told you Reggie Bush wasn't going to be an every-down running back.
Yep.
A bust as a running back, and everybody thought I was crazy there. His ideal position, now think about this, is at the slot spot.
Yeah. Yeah,
there's
you're right.
nobody, there's no linebacker that's going to deal with him. There's no corner that can deal with him. The safety can't deal with him. If somebody moved him there, you'd have a Pro Bowler for 3, 4, 5, 6 years.
I think you're right about that.
Easily.
That would be a matchup nightmare. You've given us something to chew on. Again, I know Scout, you got to check out right now. We'll look forward to hearing from you again here tonight when you're able to. And I know that your boy Jason Jones, our senior editor, he was delayed a little bit, but he's going to be on with us here in this hour. He should be on when you come back, and we'll have fun. I know it's been fun for you two guys mixing it up. You've never been on together before, but as I said before, I knew you would do great together. Nice job, fellas.
Yeah. Thanks.
Well, I love it.
A couple more questions. I've got to ask the scout when he comes back, so please come back.
No doubt. Hey, do more than that. Do more than that. Get some more than that, Nate. Come on now. Come on. I want a challenge here. Come on.
I got a couple that have to be asked. So.
Wonderful. And I see line 4 getting lit up. That must be Jason now. All right. Rick Morris and Elaine Tanko in studio here. On the phone lines, we had him on the previous hour, FDH Lounge, original dignitary, a charter dignitary, Nate Noy, before we bring our senior editor in here in a second. I just got to say, Nate, that was the first time we'd had you on doing anything here with another fellow member of our FDH Lounge pigskin think tank, the Scout Ken Becks. I've done stuff with him a million times. So as Jason, your first time with him there, but it was just damn cool to listen to you two guys breaking it down.
Yeah, I'm sorry to step on your toes, Rick. It's crazy. The guy knows so much, and there's so much I want to get his take on. It was amazing. That was the quickest 40 minutes of my life. It didn't even seem like 40 minutes.
We wanted freewheeling, man. You're picking up the vibe. You're going with it. It's just beautiful. I mean, that's what I pictured coming into tonight. You know, and I said it before. I mean, I don't want to be melodramatic about this, but there's a thing of, okay, we got a football show scheduled, and damn it, I'm excited because of this kind of football show. You know, I've been texting you guys, just telling you how excited I was about tonight. The other guy I was texting about this, we now have on line 4, our senior editor.
Jason Jones.
There he is. There's my senior editor, Jason Jones. Jason, you missed round 1 with the Scout, but he should be coming back on shortly here. We had him and Nate breaking it down during the first hour, and I'm sure you can imagine just what a blur that was, listening to those minds breaking it down.
Well, yeah, it's sad to say that I missed that whole bit, but I did catch probably the last, 4 to 5 minutes of that, and just as we probably anticipated for this show, as a listener only at that point, I thought, oh, don't go to commercial yet. We're just getting going.
You know what? And again, you know what? The new open to the show that we've been using since the 100th one, talking about the lounge and, you know, the times when you and I back here during the genesis of this thing started kind of brainstorming it and then started, you know, pitching it to everybody else like Nate that was going to come in originally. Aren't the things that are the coolest, Jason, the times that are like, damn it, that's exactly what we were like picturing back in the day? You know, those are the moments you just cherish, because it's like when you hear it get brought to life, it's like, damn it, that's what we were trying to do all along.
You know, and the funny thing is, and I'm not going to call it any organization out in particular, but, you know, as football fans or fans of any real sport, you kind of get ready for it, and we're you know, chomping the bit for this thing to get going. And so as fans, we sort of seek outlets that are going to discuss those things that we're so excited about. And when you go to some of the, let's say, more abundant avenues, it just seems to be the same regurgitated stuff from the can that isn't really very far-reaching. And this is, as a fan, this is about as good as it gets, really hashing out the details and getting into the nuances of the game that we love so much. So, yeah, for anyone listening, it's got to be one of the great joys as we get ready for football.
It really is. It really is, and it's one of those things where, I mean, I've just rejected the notion all along that it's an either-or kind of a thing, that if you got smart guys breaking stuff down, that it's inherently going to be boring. I think we're showing it can be done in a lively kind of a way here, and it's just a joy doing this with you. I just can't stop babbling about how much I love this tonight. So, all right, we'll start hour 2 here. We're going to be looking at some of the more of the pro stuff as we continue to evolve through some of the things we're looking at here. Take a look at some NFL things here. I'll start with you on this one, Jason, and see what you think about this here. Right now, you've got an NFL game that's really kind of in flux. We start a season a week from tomorrow night, where, again, we don't know what it's going to look like once it gets done here. You've got a lockout that's looming. You've got big market owners that are battling against the players, but also kind of against the small market owners. It's almost the kind of same three-way battle that you saw in hockey in recent years and in baseball. The Jerry Joneses of the world want the ability to spend uncontrollably just like the players do. But so that's kind of a thing right there. It doesn't seem like this thing is going to get settled, frankly, until the owners get significant concessions out of the players. You've got a salary system that's uncapped right now. Most people expect that to change, player protestations notwithstanding. A lot of people expect that the next couple of years are going to be the last ones that we see the Jags in Jacksonville here. They are the team that's most likely to move based on how they're doing in their market and battle to be supported there, small market, etc. You've got the implementation of an 18-game schedule, which seems pretty much inevitable by 2012. I know it's probably got to be collectively bargained, but it looks like that's in the works. So when we come out on the other side of all of this, to the extent that you can, Jason, give me a sense here of what you think we're going to be looking at and what some of the major differences might be at that point.
Well, you know, start with the Jacksonville thing. You know, I remember when the first time I heard of the Jacksonville Jaguars and that they would be a franchise, I remember thinking, I've been to Jacksonville, and I just don't see that working long term. Granted, it's Florida, and sure, there's lots of people there, but there's also many things to do. There's a lot of different options that are sort of vying for your entertainment dollar. So I can't say I'm surprised about that. My only concern with Jacksonville moving is how many teams is LA going to get before one sticks or we figure out that they just shouldn't have a team. So it is what it is. I'm sure Maurice Jones-Drew will love to go back to Southern California. And it'll probably be good for the NFL up front. It's just a matter of how long that lasts. As far as the the looming lockout and whatnot, it's going to get fixed somehow. Somehow there's going to be football. It's not like this is a doom and gloom situation. It may be bad for the players. It may drag out long enough that the owners lose too much money and all that. But as fans, do we really care? And for me, I really don't. My only concern is I desperately don't want football to miss even one regular season week. So that's my big issue there is I'm just kind of holding out with my fingers crossed, hoping things work out and we don't, as fans, lose out too much. And then as we look to the 18-game schedule, and if I may be selfish for a minute here, regardless of all the details, I think as fans we look at it and go, I'd much rather have 2 more regular season games than sustain 4 preseason games. Now, I'm probably as much degenerate as anyone. I'm actually currently watching a preseason game and have probably seen somewhere in the ballpark of about 20 of them, but that's because I love football so much that I would enjoy preseason football as opposed to no football, which sort of goes to the previous point. I think the long-term effect, though, is just as it was when we went from 14 to 16, is there are going to be times when there are debates about the merits of a certain player or a certain team, and you're going to have people that are going to say, you know, Chris Johnson's 2015 season isn't held in the right context when compared to, you know, let's say a Marshall Faulk season in the late 90s, because you're talking about 2 more games and numbers get skewed and all that. But I think once that whole strangeness of getting over the fact that it's 18 when we got so used to 16 for so long, I think ultimately we'll come around to it. It'll be another factor that we deal with, but I think ultimately we as fans will enjoy 18-game seasons instead of 16 just because it's more. And that may seem very simplistic, but you know, there's still some detractors out there that say 16 is perfect, and I say that's absolutely crazy, because if these players were not human, I'd say we should have like a 50-game season, but that's just because I enjoy football so much, and there's no rationale beyond that. But at some point, you know, we have to factor in reason the fact that these are men, and then, you know, I hope it doesn't go beyond 18 or too much beyond 18 way down the line, because at some point there's got to be a tipping point here where more games versus quality of games comes to teeter off. So for me, I'm just hoping we have football next year, and if 18 games gets put in 2012, you know, I'll take it like I take everything else, and we'll see how it works out.
Okay. Well, I want to ask you, Nate, because, again, you and I are basically contemporaries. You're just a shade younger than me. But as I look back at the time of what would be high school / college years for you and I, it seems like that's the last time we had this kind of major changes on the horizon, and maybe in retrospect the ones of the next couple of years are going to be bigger than what we saw at that point in time. When you think about at that time, you know, you did have, once the owners broke the players in '87, eventually there was the modified form of free agency. I guess that was a pretty big watershed compared to what it was from before there. And in the early 90s, you really had fantasy football starting to take off in a really, really big kind of a way to kind of transform the culture of football. But it just seems to me like the next couple of years might be even bigger than that 5 to 10 year period of time.
Yeah, I agree, Rick. And I mean, to talk about fantasy football and how the culture's changed, you know, you walk into Barnes and Nobles or something, and you literally see 12, 15, 20 fantasy football guides. I remember back in the mid-'90s when there was there may have been 2 or 3 on the market, and there's one I always looked for, and I had to go to like 3 or 4 bookstores every year to buy that one magazine. There's like 10 of them just as good now. It's amazing. I mean, you could spend $200 and not own every fantasy football preview now. So, you know, that certainly has changed the game. It's changed the way people watch the game. You know, to Jason's point about L.A., who knows? There's so many people there. You figure they could be successful out there, and it does look like Jacksonville will end up there. The economics of the game, something has to happen. I mean, they're, you know, but you know, you also think with the leaks that happened recently with Major League Baseball and how you have teams like the Pirates haven't won in over a decade, but they're making money hand over fist. You know, that kind of thing will happen in the NFL, where, you know, you've got the revenue sharing and yada, 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 and the cheap teams and the non-cheap teams. But the NFL salary cap, being what it has been, is so much better than something, say, like the NBA salary cap, which isn't even a cap. You know, an uncapped season scares me, and a lockout scares me. And the last thing I want to see, like you mentioned earlier, is the scab ball that we had growing up. That I don't think the NFL would do well at all if it had to go through a half a season or three-quarters of the season with scabs playing. So, and I don't think the owners would ever do that again. I think they learned the last time.
I don't think anybody sees that coming to pass. But yeah, I was just talking about this with somebody earlier today. Fascinating to me, fellas, and it just shows you it's power relationships in life. And how about big businessmen always have the upper hand in a situation here. The fact that the owners are getting paid no matter what by the networks next year. And somebody asked me earlier today and say, how the hell did they pull that? I said, you know how they pulled that? They pulled that because, like, hey, NBC, you don't want to do that? Fine, we'll toss our Sunday night games to PBS or the Discovery Channel or somebody else that's going to pony up the cash, you know? So it's just fascinating in that regards to me, fellows, that they were able to do that, because that's the biggest determinant right there. Owners got the TV money coming in. Players got the we're socking the money away money sitting there, which, knowing the players like we do, ain't happening.
You get that right.
So that's going to be the big thing right there, I think, as we continue to look at that. Turning to matters more traditionally involved in analyzing football, we just looked at some business stuff right there. I'll start with you on this one here, Jason. Starting from the end of last season to right now, what are some of the most momentous changes or transitions that you've seen? I mean, this could be coaching moves, even down to the level of assistant coaching. You know, you've had some prominent guys like Charlie Weiss going to Kansas City and becoming an offensive coordinator there. So whether it be coordinators or head coaches, whether it be free agent signings, draft picks, certainly you've got a big story with a draft pick out there in Denver this year, Jason, one of the most famous guys in the draft. What are some of the biggest things that you've seen, some of the most momentous stories from the end of then to right now?
Well, it's funny because, we look back, say, 2 years ago, and the first thing that would have come to mind would have been these less-known coordinators stepping into teams that were not very good and making them very good almost overnight. Atlanta comes to mind as an example there. But as far as recently, I would have to go, just a gut thought here would be, I'd have to go with some of the player movement. And you mentioned free agency, and there have been some trades, and there's a piece that I sent you about the Jets in particular, which I find interesting because it's sort of, I don't know, it's a detachment from any other approach we've ever seen, at least in recent memory, where you have those guys that aren't quite over the hill, who are not necessarily taking less money or anything, but are finding themselves on the same teams. You're finding, instead of looking at a 90s Dallas Cowboys team that had, good but not known players in the trenches, and then having 2 or 3 high-profile skill position players, and now you're looking at teams out there that have 5 and 6 offensive weapons and a defense that you could rattle every position off by name. And I don't know that it necessarily makes for a better team or a better game. It makes for great drama, sure. And we'll see how that shakes out. And, of course, the Jets would have to be the number one example of that, where you've got a promising young running back who everyone thought was the clear-cut starter. Now you bring in LT, who doesn't look as bad as he did in San Diego, along with, Jason Taylor, and going out and get Antonio Cromartie to go along with Darrelle Revis if he ever comes back. So that's going to be very interesting to see unfold. And, there's other teams, too, out there. I mean, even something like San Francisco, where you say not 2 years ago they were cellar dwellers as far as anyone's interest or the wins and losses, and yet right now they're looking, fantasy-wise at least, it looks like they're a top 5 defense. And then you look at a power running attack, and if Crabtree ever becomes as advertised, maybe there's something developing there. And then we come back over to the East Coast. You got a thing I don't think any of us ever thought we'd actually see until it started to unravel, and that is a top-flight draft pick, at least in Carson Palmer, if he is as good as he once was, throwing to Terrell Owens and Chad Ochocinco with a great young slot prospect, arguably the best tight end in 5 years to come into the draft, and a very interesting, if not intriguing, defense. So there's a handful of teams out there that don't subscribe to the 11 guys playing as one, and we'll see how that works. But I think in the last few months, that's got to be, to me, the most interesting.
Yeah, that's right up there, and your column was a really interesting one as far as what they're trying to do. The Cowboys probably seem like the closest parallel to the Jets in terms of, they eventually got themselves over the top with guys like Charles Haley and Deion Sanders and kind of augmented in that way. But, that's probably the closest parallel I can think of, in modern times anyways. Nate, how are you seeing this? I mean, there were some interesting stories, as far as how the Jets tried to consolidate that AFC championship game team, like Jason was talking about there, some interesting coaching moves. You've still got the ramifications of the Kurt Warner retirement in Arizona right now, with the very shocking news that Derek Anderson, of all people, could actually displace Matt Leinart. So many things that are happening right now. How do you kind of prioritize it in your head, Nate, as far as what you think some of the biggest ones are?
Well, for me, there's three stories that just kind of jump out amongst the mix of everything you talked about. One is the third one's probably the on-again, off-again Brett Favre story.
Uh-huh.
I never thought he wasn't going to play this year. You and I talked about it even after he announced his retirement. You said for sure he's going to play, and I kind of agreed. He just didn't want to deal with training camp. So that, we'll see what that does. So a week from tomorrow night, we'll see how that comes out for him. And then the other two stories, kind of the Ohio stories, the fact that the Browns, think about the debacle of the last few seasons, how they trade away picks to get Brady Quinn, who's going to be the quarterback of the future, and then Derek Anderson comes in and they give him all this big money, these Pro Bowl money, and they're both gone. And you bring in a guy that I was looking yesterday at a ranking of NFL quarterbacks, and Mr. Delhomme was ranked 30th on this list with the comment that he could not find another job in the NFL if he wanted one. Nobody else would give the guy, make him a backup probably. We'll see what happens, but the Browns go from that quarterback controversy to having a guy that nobody else wants. And then the other story I think is big is what happened in Cincinnati. The highest paid wide receiver, they cut him. They spent like $8-10 million in signing bonus, and then they turn around and get T.O. to go with Ochocinco, and they just waive him. That says a lot about the economics of football right there. You're going to give Bryant, a $28 million contract with like $7 million guaranteed, and then he can't even get out of training camp? What kind of business decision is that? That's just amazing. So, we'll see what kind of ramifications that has for the Bengals. The one thing about the NFL salary cap that I've always liked, and we didn't touch about earlier, is that there's a cap and there's a floor.
Uh-huh.
So you have to spend so much money, and at least the Bengals will be above the floor because of the $7-8 million they just gave away to Bryant. So.
Yeah, they will be, and the accounting maneuvers are going to be kind of funny to see. The other thing is, Nate, I will say this, and I don't really have a rooting interest for the Arizona Cardinals, except when they're playing the Squealers in the Super Bowl. Then I'm rooting for them. But I think Ken Wisenhunt's a brilliant guy. I have an admiration for him as a coach. I thought going back to Pittsburgh with a lot of the things he did as their offensive coordinator. But it's something where I was disappointed in the offseason to see the Bidwells, remembering that they're the Bidwells, and now that there's no salary cap or floor, just basically shedding so many parts here. The Warner thing, okay, they couldn't do anything about that, but all the other guys that they let get away, and I thought Mike Brown was going to do the same thing in Cincinnati. Props to him for not having done that yet and for having proved me wrong to this point. But one of the worst parts here about this whole Matt Leinart situation, this is so cynical, Nate, is that if they cut Leinart and the salary cap gets reinstated next year or whenever the resolution comes, as people expect, that in an accounting maneuver, the rest of the money accelerating against the cap will keep them above the salary floor as an accounting maneuver. That's pathetic when you've got a franchise the way that Arizona's built it up, and now you're looking for accounting gimmicks to stay above a salary floor. The season ticket holders should be outraged.
Yeah, sounds like it's a mirror image of the Bengals as well. So
Oh.
Wouldn't want to be a season ticket holder for either one of those franchises, no question.
You know, real quick, Rick, if I may interject, on the Bengals situation, I know you and I talked about it beforehand, and I don't know what the situation is. I don't know if he just didn't measure up or what, but you got to think, just schematically, that if it's 3rd and long in any dire situation, and Carson Palmer's in the shotgun, and you've got the opposing team's nickelback lined up against Bryant, and I'm not saying he's the second coming or anything, but that matchup is scary. And I'm just dying to know if what you guys are mentioning is actually 100% of the reason. Because you can't look at it from a coaching standpoint and think that wouldn't have been beneficial. And the other thing I just thought of here, just to throw into the hat, is quarterbacks in general. You know, you mentioned the Tebow situation, and yeah, they're going absolutely ape feces over it. But you still have the journeyman sort of guy with Kyle Orton that is literally the guy, and they believe they're going to ride him out the whole time. Yet in other markets, you got Donovan McNabb, who I think at times we probably all thought he was going to retire an Eagle. He's traded in division. Then you've got the guy that left Washington going to Oakland, which may not seem like much, but Jason Campbell is absolutely a monumentous step up from Jamarcus Russell. Romo, fantasy-wise, I don't know if we've gone into this yet, but Romo was not that far statistically removed from Drew Brees. It just seems like the quarterback position, if it is a quarterback league, has been shuffled more this offseason than any other I can remember.
Uh-huh. Yeah, there's been a lot of just goofiness kind of going around there, and that it's just disappointing, to see owners like the Bidwells, and then again possibly Mike Brown, depending on what the reason was, whether it was an innocent football-related reason for going in that direction or not. We went on our mock draft show a couple weeks ago. We were talking about how the Bengals could just blow everybody off the field with those 3 guys and Bryant in the slot. Yeah, why they wouldn't want to do that? If I was a Bengals fan, I'd be pounding my fist looking for answers now. Another question for you guys. 2 surprise teams this year. Who do you think is going to be a positive surprise? Who is going to be a negative surprise? I'll chime in as well after I hear them from you guys here. I've got my 2, but I'm curious to see if either of my 2 are along the lines of what you guys are going with. Start with you, Jason.
Wow, you know, I've been debating this one in my head for probably 3 hours. I know who I'm probably going to pick to be surprising in the positive light, and I don't know that it's going to be that much of a reach, really. But I'll just throw that out right now, and maybe I'm in a corner, but I'll go ahead and say Detroit Lions. Not necessarily for any sort of fantasy implication. I believe that Stafford is sort of matriculating in the right direction. Calvin Johnson is and will always be a beast. And I got to say, of all the rookie running backs I've seen, even though Matthews looks like the real deal, Javid Best has had some highlight runs, and he's kind of scary as long as what he's done in the preseason translates. I think that defense is coming together. They've got a defensive line that's absolutely scary when you think about the recently Cleveland-hated Ndamukong Suh and Vanden Bosch on the same line. So that's the team that I would probably pick to be a pleasant surprise. And when I say that, by no means is this like the Arizona Cardinals syndrome from a few years ago. I do not believe they make the playoffs. But imagine, when was the last time you saw a Detroit Lions team that legitimately won, say, 7, 8, 9 games? It's been a while. So I think that'll be pleasant, at least for the fans of Detroit. As far as a negative one, I think the counterbalance here is, are we doing it versus expectations or just in general? And if it's against expectations, I'm going to say the Houston Texans. I know a lot of people are picking them to do really well. I still think that they've got a way to go to sort of gel everything together. I don't think 2010 is the year where they pull it off. I think last year was great, I just have a sneaking suspicion they'll regress a little bit. And if I could throw in sort of an honorable mention, I would probably say Seattle, but by no direct effect of Pete Carroll.
Okay, very interesting. Nate, what are yours? Positive and negative surprises for you?
It's so funny. First of all, my positive is Seattle.
they're my honorable mention positive, actually. Yeah.
I really think that team's, I think Carroll, hey, he might not be able to pay him as much as he did when he was at USC, but, they brought in Charlie Whitehurst. He'll see some time behind Hasselbeck. Yeah, Hasselbeck's been to the Pro Bowl a few times. He can carry a team. I can see a Forsett Jones combination being decent. You got to like TJ Houshmandzadeh and Deion Butler, Deion Branch. They're deep team in a weak division. My flip to that is San Francisco, who everybody seems to be picking to win the West. Alex Smith, what has that guy ever done in the pros? His backup's David Carr. What has that guy ever done? Frank Gore, how often does that guy get hurt? All the time. So, you're going to have Glenn Coffey as your featured back when Gore misses his customary 4 to 5 games. Now, they do have Ted Ginn Jr. and Crabtree, but guess what? They got Alex Smith throwing them the damn ball. So I think the 49ers are in trouble. I don't think they'll be a playoff team. I think they'll be 7-9, 6-10. And I think Seattle could surprise a lot of teams out there. That's a weak division, the weakest division in football by far. And, I think the dark horse out there is Seattle, and it'll be at the expense of the 49ers.
Okay. Very interesting as far as that division for positive and negative. I will tell you, I think that both Seattle and San Francisco are on my honorable mention list for positive. I see them both going at least 9-7 here. I think Seattle's going to win the division. I like where they're going. I think they're going to have some guys healthy offensively. They obviously got to pick the right guy, settle on the right guy at running back, and make that stick. For San Francisco, what you said about Glenn Coffey, I think even if anything happens to Frank Gore, they're not getting that guy out of the monastery. I think San Francisco is pretty much stuck where they're at if anything happens to Gore. But my positive team, ultimately, positive surprise, I don't see a lot of people picking them for the Super Bowl. I see a lot of people picking a New York team for the Super Bowl, just not the one I'm picking. I think the Giants are going to make it. I think it's going to be the Manning Bowl here, as I think the Colts and the Giants will be there. I don't think the Giants have enough to beat the Colts, but I think they've got enough to get back there. A lot of times after a year or two off, these two teams, these teams recently have been able to come back, make another strong run. I think the whole post-Plexico Burress transition, which really hurt the Giants offensively, I think that transition is just about behind them. I like the Giants to win the NFC, which would be a surprise by any measure. By the way, Houston, I got to gently disagree, Jason. I've got them as an AFC wild card. I do believe in them here. As far as a negative surprise and looking at this, it's hard to really say. I'm just going to say relative to expectations on this. Honorable mention for me would be the Saints. I got them at 9-7, missing the playoffs. But the team, I think, believe it or not, a bigger disappointment if they miss the playoffs than the defending Super Bowl champion is the Cowboys. For as much hype as everybody puts on them year after year, the Super Bowl's in Dallas next year. I don't think they even make the playoffs. I think they're at 9-7. They're in the grid, basically, playing for the tiebreakers, and I think they come up a little bit short on that. A year of not even making the playoffs would qualify Dallas as the biggest disappointment in the league. So both of my biggest surprise and biggest disappointments coming out of the same division as well, the NFC East. So before we go to break here, fellas, any closing thoughts on what we all had just had to say?
Well, I got some real quick, and just off to the side here. If we are going to, follow up with your pick of the Giants, there's a name for all of you who have not been paying attention to the preseason that you need to keep your eyes open for. It's not Mario Manningham. It's not Hakeem Nicks. It's little Victor Cruz.
Yeah.
And for anyone who never saw the kid play, didn't see his game 2 weeks ago, I understand it's preseason, but when a man breaks records in a preseason game, it's time to take notice. So I do think that instead of it being the way it was with Plaxico and Steve Smith, I think you may see a situation where Eli has more weapons than he ever thought he was going to, say, this time last year. But Victor Cruz is a sensational young player that nobody knows about.
Absolutely. Nate, what about you? Any thoughts before break?
Wow, yeah, I like to see that. We'll see. I'm not as down on Dallas as you are, Rick, and Vegas certainly isn't. They're actually the NFC favorite to make the Super Bowl this year, but we shall see. It's there's always turmoil down there. I think the Jets, with all their issues, sophomore jinx for Sanchez. I do like LT. I think he's going to be decent there, but a lot of question marks. Revis holding out. That's a big problem for them. You can see the Jets easily miss the playoffs. I mean, the other thing I just wanted to point out, Rick, you and I talk about this every year, and it's true for the last decade. Never more than 8 teams repeat to the playoffs. Usually 6. Most of the time 6 or 7. But every preseason magazine predicts basically 11 or 12 of the teams to repeat. We're certainly going to see the same thing this year. There's just no way more than 7 teams will be back in the playoffs than were last year. But like you said, the Colts.
Oh my God!
That's the one team that somehow breaks the the every other year thing. The Colts certainly will be there, and they're strong. So we'll see what happens.
Absolutely.
As from Nate's mouth to God's ears, LaDainian Tomlinson in the first quarter against the number ones on their own 3-yard line just broke one through the teeth of the defense for 40 yards.
Wow. Ain't that something?
Vintage LT.
Yeah. Vintage LT. Thank you, Michael Cole, for that.